All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend, Kade Crockford. Kade is the Privacy Rights Coordinator at the ACLU of Massachusetts, which you can find at aclum.org. She also writes the Privacy SOS blog, which is privacysos.org. Kade, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Hi, Matt.
So, Kade, recently, about a week ago, the FBI released a file after a Freedom of Information request on the surveillance of activist Aaron Swartz. It's just the fact that they were surveilling him is pretty freaky. But tell us, what exactly did the surveillance, did the file actually say?
Well, from February 6th, 2009 to April 20, 2009, the FBI had an open investigation on Aaron Swartz looking into his activity downloading what should be and are actually free, publicly available federal court records from what's called the PACER system. It appears as if Aaron was basically trying to make that information available to everyone. Currently, you can access PACER information in a bunch of different ways. Primarily, people get access to that data. Again, it's public records, federal court records, through private services like LexisNexis. If you talk to any legal student or a lawyer, they can tell you about the fees involved in paying for those sorts of things. And so in the interest of making that information free, basically a pilot program had been set up by the federal court system to make PACER data available for download for free at some public libraries. And so Aaron had the great idea to basically download all of the data from those public libraries and then make it available sort of in a searchable kind of Google-esque format online for everyone. And basically, the FBI found out that he was doing that, didn't like it, opened an investigation into him. Apparently, the FBI's Computer Crimes Division, which is the Department of Justice's Computer Crimes Division, which is the division that ultimately went after him in the prosecution that never finished because he killed himself, related to the JSTOR issue at here in Cambridge. It was the same Computer Crimes Division that was investigating him back in 2009 related to the PACER incident, but they dropped the investigation, and once they did, the FBI dropped their surveillance of Swartz. But the records show essentially that the FBI field office in D.C. Pinged the FBI in Chicago and said, will you check out this guy, Aaron Swartz? So, then Chicago writes back and says, yeah, we went and basically drove past his house. I think it's actually his parents' house. Drove past his house, looked for information about any vehicles that he owns, blah, 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 blah. Couldn't really see anything in the house. This is a quote from the file. It says, house is set on a deep lot behind other houses. This is a heavily wooded dead-end street with no other cars parked on the road, making continued surveillance difficult to conduct without severely increasing the risk of discovery. So basically, they didn't learn anything from driving past his house. Learned when they searched databases that he had never been arrested and didn't own any cars, and then sort of dropped it. The investigation, the FBI surveillance into him didn't really uncover much of anything. Aaron was really smart. An FBI agent called Aaron, these documents reveal, and said, we'd like to talk to you about this incident with the PACER system. And Aaron said, well, I'm going to get back to you. I'll talk to my attorney. And then apparently it appears as if the attorney called back and basically and said, I'm happy to talk to you if I can have some assurance that nothing that he says is going to jeopardize Aaron. And the FBI agent basically says, well, I can't promise you that. And so the lawyer says, well, thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to give you an interview then. And then 4 days later, the FBI closes the investigation. So there's not much actually there. I mean, I think more than anything, it's really sad to read these records and see that, they basically went after him for something very similar a number of years later, and it ended his life. So.
No, absolutely, and the fact that it's just another example of the government targeting someone that they really just don't like, and maybe don't like their political viewpoints and their politics, and it's another one of those examples, those kind of frightening examples of government resources being used to intimidate and harass someone who really didn't do anything that was that serious at all.
Yeah, and that's why rules are so important. We've been having a sort of sad national debate of late about whether or not the government has the authority to kill people without due process. We've been having debates for the past 5 or 10 years about the limits of government authority when it comes to spying on our private communications. And a lot of people sort of don't imagine that they would ever find themselves in somebody like Aaron's shoes, but it's totally possible that, something that you're doing that is perfectly legal, the government won't like and will therefore use the powers that you have, approved of, because you've assumed that they'll be used against bad people in circumstances that you think are appropriate. They could use them against you. So this is really why rules are so important, because, if the FBI had clearer rules about what kinds of investigations it could undertake, it doesn't appear as if Aaron actually broke the law when he was working on this PACER project. And if the FBI was required to have some evidence to show that you are engaged in any illegal activity before it opened an investigation into you, then maybe those files never would have been written. But unfortunately, after 9/11, the FBI's rule book was changed, and now the FBI doesn't even need to have any suspicion to believe that you're involved in any kind of criminal activity to investigate you. So, yeah, it's very troubling.